I often say to myself, I didn't get this far to only get this far, and I owe it to myself. That's a mantra that I keep saying to myself whenever I have these moments of challenge.
What if I told you that the future of human connection isn't disappearing, it's actually evolving? That one entrepreneur has spent the last decade proving that technology isn't here to replace people, but to actually bring them closer together. Today, we are diving into the mind of a visionary, a disruptor, and a relentless builder of the future, Thea Myhrvold. She's not just another tech founder. She's an international powerhouse who saw gaps in industries before anyone else did and built solutions to really fill them. From launching one of the first ever gamified education apps to revolutionize digital learning with Teach Me Now, to now leading Getbee, a Microsoft-backed platform that's bringing live, human-driven sales back to e-commerce. Thea is on a mission to prove that AI and technology should enhance human interaction, not to replace it. But here is what really sets her apart. She doesn't just build businesses, she really rewrites the rules. She's one of the 2% of female founders to secure venture capital, a Cartier Woman Award winner, an Expo2020 global innovator, an international speaker, and much more. So welcome, Thea.
Thank you for having me.
So what is for you a good DNA of a CEO?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we spoke about it a little bit earlier as well, but ultimately a CEO is a leader. And what is a leader? It goes back to values, right? So someone who has a clear vision, but is grounded in their values and anchored in their values as well, and can help others see the vision where you want to go. But that North Star or that compass is shaped by the values and how you want to get there. Because the path might change, but a good CEO and their DNA is anchored and rooted in values.
Right. And so what are the values you have now in your company? And let's talk about the current one, Getbee.
Yes.
So yeah, what are the main values here?
So the core values for us, or the core pillars, are around trust. So with trust, you have accountability, therefore you can have flexibility. We spoke about remote work, for example. But trust, not just in the way we work as a team, but what we're building through our technology. We're also helping our customers build trust with their online shoppers, right? So trust is at the core of everything we do. So that's one of the pillars. Innovation is another one. And I see that as a way to see the world or problem solve. So in entrepreneurship, you're continuously problem solving. But if you have an innovative approach, it's seeing things in a different way and being open to being practical or problem solving in different ways. And innovation, I think, also comes with a positive mindset, right? Seeing things in an opportunistic and positive way. So that's another one. And the third pillar that we have is community. So everything we do, especially around the technology that we're building, is also helping our brands build communities online. But us as a team, we're also building an international and global community. We're one of the most diverse tech companies, I think, out there today, with people truly all over the world. And we're also very balanced when it comes to diversity and gender as well, which we're also very proud of.
Nice. Did the value change from the companies you built before?
Yes. I mean, the core values are still very much the same, but I think because of how we're building certain things, they might differ slightly. But in the previous two, it was also around trust and innovation and community. There was more values also around continuous learning because we were building an online learning platform. But the core values are still steeped in the same way. And throughout my whole journey, a question that I ask everyone is, and it's not necessarily a value, but I think it helps shape the way you see the world, is, does this make you proud? And I ask that to everyone I work with is, does working with this person make you proud, this partner, this client, this investor? So if you're ever in some sort of dilemma and you really check in with yourself to say, okay, am I proud of this moment or how I'm acting? Like, that's such a good compass to know if you're on the right track or not.
Yeah, very interesting. With Teach Me Now, your previous company, so you said you had similar values. Is it that the founder or the CEO gives the values?
That's a good question. I think you're very much part of setting the values. We have a very flat organization structure, so we're also open to feedback. We've done workshops with the team to really co-create on values.
So with Getbee, you have now at the moment 15 staff fully remote.
Yeah.
With Teach Me Now, you had?
We were around 20 fully remote as well. Yeah. And we had an office in Dubai at some point too. Yeah.
So again, about the values, would you say that the founder and CEO should give the values and only straight hire based on those values?
Hire based on those values, yes. I like co-creating with my team to making sure that I'm not having any blind spots, so to speak. But you should have the core vision around your values and then be open to feedback and iterating or, adjusting slightly if you get feedback along the way.
Right. Yeah. You built now this amazing companies. You also funded 2%, actually. Impressive. Fortunately, only female founders have been funded yet. So you really, from a small part, what is your superpower?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's active listening. I ask a lot of questions. If you ask the people who work with me or around me, I really love asking interesting questions. And active listening, somebody taught me this once. It's not just about listening to respond. It's about listening to understand. Most people listen to respond. They're hearing you, but they're still preparing their answer when you're talking. But for me, it's really about listening to deeply understand what's being said, what's not being said, what's being said in body language. What are the other social cues that I'm picking up on? And I think that's such an underrated superpower because most people don't spend the time to deeply, deeply understand what's going on. And I think you can resolve a lot of conflict, a lot of misunderstanding. You can also really understand what drives people, what motivates people. And ultimately, if you're in tech and you're building a product, it's truly about empathetically listening to the customer's problem. Because if you're not listening and you're not solving the right problem, you don't really have a product. So I would say my superpower is really actively listening to understand.
And of course, asking the right question, asking better question, better answers.
Yes.
It's interesting because I also asked your intern before the interview, what is a superpower from Thea? And you know what she said?
What did she say?
Asking the right question and proactively asking. And I think that's such an important learning for everyone listening and watching, because I really think that's so super important to actually ask questions. And also in the meeting, when I have, for example, a meeting with my team or with my team and my colleagues, I always try to be the last one who speaks, to not prime everyone because the CEO said that. I think that's so important.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. Give people a space to speak. Yeah.
Interesting. Good. But how did everything started? So you haven't been the person, all your life who built and all that success. How did it start with you into the business world?
So my academic career was completely different. I wanted to study international relations, and I studied international relations with economics with the goal of getting into the United Nations.
Wow, because you actually have from Norway and have from Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, so I'm born in Saudi. I've lived in Norway, Greece, and Switzerland. And growing up also in the diplomatic world, I thought the way to make the world a better place was to work for the UN. So I went to study in Geneva in Switzerland. I'd done my internships at Amnesty, the EU, and all these other places, and finally got an opportunity to work for the UN. But once I got there, in this massive bureaucratic organization, as a young person at the time and as a student, you're living in one of the most expensive cities in the world, not getting paid, and you've already done internships. And I had so much that I wanted to contribute and to give. So I was faced with this very bureaucratic, heavy organization. And at the same time, in parallel, do you remember when the App Store was announced with Steve Jobs? That was like a paradigm shift in how we could release and distribute technology.
Right.
And I remember watching that announcement that Steve Jobs had at the time. And I thought, I was teaching students just to kind of supplement my income part-time. So I was a tutor.
In what did you teach?
Economics. High school economics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my first two students, one had hyper ADD and heavy dyslexia. So reading economic textbooks wasn't exactly a lot of fun. So I created games for my students, nothing to do with tech at the time, pen, paper, very old school, but timed short, fun games around economic concepts. And within 2 months, both of my students got way above average scores. It was fascinating just to see their transformation as people, their confidence as well. One actually went on to study economics, and she absolutely hated it when we started. So to see that transformation in my students was like a light bulb moment for me to say, okay, as a young person, I can still make a difference. these games are helping my students. How can I transform that into an app?
Right.
I taught myself everything I could about apps. I actually went on to build one of the first apps for high school students, well, back in 2010. So when apps were still very new. And it was one of the first apps for the IB, which is a very specific curriculum. But it got thousands of downloads all over the world because, again, it was so niche, it was so specific. And through that app, I got so many requests for teaching online. So I had Skype, I had email, Skype at the time, email, PayPal, and different things to coordinate my online classes. At 21, was making over $100 an hour on Skype, but I couldn't find a platform like an Uber or like an Airbnb model where I could set my own price, create my own content and courses, and teach. So I decided to build that. So my first app really led me to my second venture. Sort of became a funnel for my second venture.
Nice.
But it was so interesting to see, I'm not professionally trained in tech, right?
Yes.
But I think that's the beauty in the world of tech is you can really be self-taught because technology is changing so quickly. So if you find, to your point again on values and vision, the right people around you on this journey, you can build something in tech. You can work in tech. I think it's a little bit daunting for most people, but tech affects all of us in everyday life. So it's really, again, going back to problem solving and listening, understanding, okay, how can I translate this into a digital experience that makes sense?
Right. So you started everything in, then your career basically in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What was the next step?
So because I gave myself a year, I said, well, if this doesn't work, I can always apply for jobs and do something else. But I kind of jumped into entrepreneurship very quickly. I thought I will regret it for the rest of my life if I don't try. And this is the moment to do it because I saw an opportunity in the market. I saw an opportunity with like the App Store and how the distribution and the scale of technology happened so quickly. It was that wave that was coming, right? In terms of like how easily accessible technology was becoming.
Yes.
And I thought if I don't be a part of this growth wave or journey now, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life later.
I think that's such an important point for everyone listening because especially the people who are still maybe in a 9-to-5 job and still thinking about something, at the end, we really have to think about, when I look back at my life at one point, would I regret not giving a full shot to being an entrepreneur and doing this project or this idea. Yeah. However, we also know as entrepreneurs, it's not an easy ride. You have lots of commitment. You also have things that you cannot do. Maybe meeting friends regularly or and I think every entrepreneur has also their regrets in certain parts because sometimes the business or your baby, you call it, requires everything from you. And I mean everything, right?
So much energy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for everyone who's thinking, should I do it or not? Of course, if you're as an entrepreneur, that we should, all in, go in for it. But I think you just have to think about the commitment. Would I regret not having done that at one point? And I think that happened to you, right?
Yes.
And then you said, okay, I'm all in. Then the first thing, normally you have the forming phase, what's quite good. Then the storming phase a bit, where things don't go so well. What were a case you remember where you said, oh, wow.
So many. I think that's the thing that's important to talk about in entrepreneurship because I think we're sold this fallacy. Like you have a 10-page pitch deck, you raise money, and then 1, 2, 3, and then unicorn.
You're right.
Like there's this recipe for success that makes it sound so easy. But between every little step in this process, from even just creating your first pitch deck, you might have an existential crisis. There are so many steps along this journey where you fail or you get challenged or you get rejected, or there are so many moments of doubt and existential moments where you just really have to pick yourself back up again and keep learning. So I think that shift in mindset of saying like, I need a no to get to a yes. I need these kind of rejections to put me in the right path, and really seeing it as a growth opportunity is very different.
What kept you alive to continue? Like, I don't want to say fighting because it's not really like a fight, but sometimes it feels like it. But going through it, have the persistence to say, hey, what I'm doing it.
I often say to myself, I didn't get this far to only get this far, and I owe it to myself.
Wow.
That's a mantra that I keep saying to myself whenever
Right.
I have these moments of challenge.
Yeah.
And I can share now because I've gone through it. But during, so while I was selling my other company and starting this company, Getbee.com, I was in the middle of fundraising for this. I was starting it up. My father's had Parkinson's for over 15 years, and he was going through a very painful and difficult death, and I lost my father.
Sorry to hear, yeah.
Thank you. But that was an incredible sort of learning opportunity as well, to your point on like keeping fighting, because while building a business, while leading a team, how do you deal with grief? How do you deal with death? How do you deal with, and at the same time, 2 weeks later, divorce. I went through a very difficult divorce and I've been to court in different countries. So keeping everything afloat on different fronts, I think to your point on challenges, that was one of my hardest times, but also making sure that I communicated well with my team and saying, well, hey, we're all human. We're all people at the end of the day. And that's also the essence of what we're building in our business, is to really be vulnerable and to be open. That was something that I was challenged with because I'm actually quite a private person, but I decided to be very open and vulnerable in sharing what I was going through. And the incredible outpouring and response and support that I also got from my team and my closest people and my investors was, going back to the value of community, it was beautiful for me to also see that sense of community rising up through what I had built too. And I think that was really beautiful for me to see and to feel. Yeah.
Is there one big regret that you encounter being an entrepreneur and going this route and saying, look, I'm building that, but maybe I would have still the marriage if I wouldn't had.
Well, my marriage had nothing, or I'm sorry, my divorce had nothing to do with being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
To protect his privacy, I won't share more, but it absolutely had nothing to do with being an entrepreneur.
Because I think lots of entrepreneurs have the challenge who are married, and then the partner develops themselves quite fast, traveling international, learning more people and building network. Because I think also entrepreneurship is also making you a different person, if it makes sense. Because you learn everything like so much because you haven't had that challenge before. So obviously, I'd always tell my people, my colleagues, when they come with me with a challenge, we're not allowed to say problems in our company.
Yes, a challenge.
It's a challenge. And they said,
or an opportunity.
I always, exactly, an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I tell them, look, you should enjoy really this opportunity, because in 1 year from now, you look back and you would love to have such a small challenge again. So what I try to say is, I think we grow exponential or quite fast, or most of us, if they really make use of it and go out of the comfort zone.
But to your point on marriage, just putting that out there as well, I think the most important business decision you can make for yourself is also who you choose as a partner.
True.
Because you really need a supportive person. To your point on entrepreneurship, it's quite a lonely journey. It's quite an existential journey. There are lots of ups and downs.
100%.
So finding the right person to be there in your corner, or whether it's not a life partner, and let's, for whatever reason, say you don't want to get married, but your closest friends, the people that you spend, the 5 closest people that you spend the most time with, also affect the way you think, the way you learn, what you're exposed to, not exposed to. So really being conscious of and intentional of choosing the people that you want to spend time with and surround yourself with, also knowing that will impact your journey in one way or another. And there's no right or wrong answer here. Everyone's different and everyone has different priorities, but I think it's something to be conscious of.
100%. I think it's so interesting to ensure that when you have a partner, and that's just a big tip I can give to everyone listening, at least from my understanding, to really take your partner with you on the same journey.
Yes.
Right? Because it's a development, and I think it's important that when you have a partner to already tell them before you start, or when you start here, are you willing to do this journey with me? I think it's important.
And it goes back to values too, right? It's like the ultimate JV.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also interesting that lots of values I see from entrepreneurs, and I talk lately to a lot, thanks also to the podcast, but also just because, as you said, it's a bit lonely. So you look for entrepreneurs. I actually built a a group around me where I selected certain entrepreneurs, and we meet it up once a month, online, offline. And I think it's just important, as you said, to have the right environment around you. And I realized that the values they have privately, they also have within a company.
Yes.
And it starts with trust. It starts with having those values and kind of living them, right? So to show that's my value.
Of course.
Yeah. And that's what I learned also with my 3-year-old daughter to, I can tell her not to do something or to do something, but I think you need to be the example. And I think that goes back also to the company to lead by example with trust, with relentless ownership and so on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actions speak louder than words.
100%. Yeah. Let's talk about some learnings. And I mean, you had many learnings. So now on the one hand, you have, you're now in New York. On the other hand, you're now in Dubai quite often. Is it like 50-50 or?
Yeah, I spend a lot of my time both in New York and Dubai. But when I'm here in the States, I also travel a lot to Seattle and San Francisco because we work very closely with Microsoft. So I'm spending a lot of time in Redmond at the Microsoft campus. So it's a very international job, which I love because I've sort of intentionally built it this way too. But I love the energy that since we're here in New York, the city has too.
For sure. But let's talk about the entrepreneurship. What could Dubai or the Middle East learn maybe from USA and vice versa?
So I think I'll start with Dubai first. So Dubai, where I've spent more than 15 years, Dubai is amazing and incredible at positioning and PR. And I think there are so many stories to be learned from the storytelling that comes out of the Middle East. And from a historical and cultural perspective, storytelling is something that's very embedded in the tribal cultures, right? We tell stories. And I was very fortunate to be a part of the World Expo. So Expo2020, that was just in Dubai.
And you was actually one of the faces for
Expo,
it,
yes, under His Highness Sheikh Mohammed's pavilion. We were also part of Expo Live, which is their social impact entrepreneurship program.
Right.
We were also part of the Cartier Women's Awards Pavilion. So a part of Expo in many different ways and spoke at many events. But something that I learned from my time with Expo was, the mantra they kept teaching us was speak to the heart and the head will follow. So really in your storytelling, make it emotional, make it personal, connect to people at a very human level, because then people will listen. Right. And they're very good at positioning and storytelling and crafting meaningful and purposeful stories. So I think that's something that the whole world can learn from in terms of how they've positioned certain things. And you were even saying before around Dubai, people knew the Burj Al Arab before they maybe knew about Dubai. And so they're very good at positioning, marketing. And I think it's been incredible to watch the journey and the transformation of Dubai from that perspective.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing that now growing in the region with Saudi opening up and changing. I'm incredibly proud to see the changes that are happening in Saudi. I'm born in Jeddah for context. I remember Saudi in the 90s. And I spoke at something called the MISC Global Forum, which is one of their biggest events, the year that Saudi opened up for women. I'll never forget sitting on that stage because for me it was very emotional. Historically, especially in Riyadh, you have to cover as a woman, fully cover your hair and everything as well.
At this time, you also were not allowed to drive in a car as a female with a male who is not related
your family,
to you.
Exactly. Yes. Even that conference was segregated historically.
Right.
This was the first year that conference was mixed. I was on a stage with a woman just sitting in a suit. I was wearing abaya out of respect because that's what I do when I'm there, but it was, or like the local sort of dress. But it was very interesting to just sit on that stage, look out at the audience, and it's around 10,000 people, just to kind of really understand, wow, never in my life did I think I would see this moment in Saudi. And here I am as a part of this change in this very cultural moment. So I will have to give some credit to the Middle East because they've done an incredible job in terms of a lot of the changes that are happening from that perspective. And I'm very excited for the future.
Absolutely.
There.
I think it's a learning curve there. It's so fascinating. I'm now 18 years living in Dubai. I remember I went actually to Saudi and gave a presentation there, and there was a line in between, and on one side the male was sitting, on the other the female.
Yeah.
And things changed so massively.
Yeah.
And now I think with back to being also so open and adapting change. But I think what I learned is that this change, management, or this motivation to make things different and move things forward, that made also, for example, Dubai so strong. And I just came yesterday and flew from Dubai to New York. And I remember in Dubai, I went through custom by just walking. So basically, they have a face scan, and you just walk through, right? So no wait, you don't even have to stop, yeah, but you just walk through. Then I landed in JFK, and it took me 3 hours. And I was one of the first leaving the plane to actually go through customs. And I thought, wow, interesting.
It's interesting for me as well, considering that the US is such a tech-forward sort of, or known for the tech advancements. But I will say Dubai or the UAE as well has some amazing technology that they've implemented. For example, at the airports, you can do everything on an app, pay all your bills, get married, everything you can register on an app there.
Absolutely.
So everything is very streamlined from a digital perspective.
Gasoline, your laundry will be picked up all by an app. So you push a button and it will be picked up.
So it's a very convenient and safe setup in Dubai.
True.
Yeah. Or in the Middle East. Yeah.
I think also that's why the Silicon Valley area is so successful, because the people are willing to try out. So the adoption rate is a lot higher, I would say, as anywhere else in the USA, that they say, okay, let's try an electric car. It only drives, 50 miles in total, and let's try it. And I think that's an important mindset to have as an entrepreneur in your own company, to understand it's always you against you, and to get every day 1% better. And that's where my learning from Dubai was, that they had the biggest mall, and then I said, what are they building here? No, the biggest mall in the world. But I said, they have it already. Yeah. So, so they had the built the new biggest mall. They have now the biggest tower in the world, and they built now the
another one
biggest tower. And they had the biggest airport in the world, now already the biggest airport. So it's not only about the biggest, but it's really to move these things forward and to understand it's you against you.
Absolutely. You're always striving for improvement.
Yeah. And that's, I think, also when I would talk to my team and they talk about the competition is doing this and this, I said, let's guys just focus on us, talk to the customer and see how can we give him more value and release more pain points for the customer. Is this also how you drive your business?
Absolutely. And going back to what I was saying earlier about active listening. Yeah. It's very important.
Yeah, that's really a wonderful skill to have. For people who want to fundraise, I think for people who actually want to fundraise, what is your tip and hints on this court or ball game? Because I think it's, again, being an entrepreneur is one thing, then also raising money, I would argue, is also probably a different game again in the whole entrepreneurship industry, right? On the one hand, you make the customers happy, but then you have a kind of a different language you have to talk to investors too.
And I've learned so much in this process because, as I was saying earlier, I think a lot of startup founders are sold this fallacy of just have a 10-page pitch deck and you're good to go and people have to invest. And,
it sounds easy, when you talk to people, yeah.
But it's actually the ultimate sales job, because you're selling the future vision of your company, the future value of your company. And it's really about understanding, and going back to active listening, understanding what are the VC, because they have to make money. It's a business for them. So what's in it for them? How do you make them successful, right? So if you reverse engineer it and understand, okay, if let's say they put $1 million into a business, what is the kind of return that they're looking for, and what timeline, on what terms does it make sense? There's so much terminology. And there's so much, I think for first-time founders, it's a whole different ball game because they're not finance people. I wasn't a finance person. I didn't understand what a 20% discount versus a cap versus a safe note versus there's so many different financial structures that you can look at when you're fundraising that you as a founder truly need to understand, because when you're receiving term sheets from investors, you also need to know how that affects you in the future. So ultimately, all this to say, it all goes back to people. So my mindset shifted when I understood, who do I want to make money for? Not who do I want to take money from? Mm-hmm. That was a key learning for me.
Wow.
Because ultimately, in the beginning, when you're fundraising, you're like, oh, it's this great honor to get
Right.
this money, right? Because someone's putting, let's say, $1 million into it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of responsibility. However, if you think about it as who do I want to make money for? Because I can 10x that $1 million for you. That also shifts your behavior in your discussions. It aligns on values. You understand, okay, what is the long-term goal? How will you help me if things become complicated? Because life happens, right? It's not just a straight line from here to there in terms of success. And the best investors know this, right? There's black swan events like COVID. There's, moments that we cannot predict. So really understand who is there for you, especially in early stage funding. This is key. When you're maybe Series B, Series C, and things are a bit more automated and you can do more predictive analysis, it's maybe a little bit of a different story. I would still say values are key. However, it's so mission critical in the early phases to make sure you have the right investor team or group around you as well, to make sure that you're set up for success and that they're set up for success. Has to be a win-win.
I think it's so powerful to think about who do you want to make money for. I think that's super good point. Thank you for that. But you also studied at Stanford. That makes life also a bit easier when you fundraise. Is that correct?
It helps when you fundraise, but that wasn't part of. I will say, so I did an online course at Stanford. I didn't study at Stanford, but I went to.
But you have a degree from.
Yes, but I did. And I also took a very interesting executive program at INSEAD.
Yes.
I had a very interesting negotiation professor there who also said something to me once, which I'll never forget, but it was a nice quote. It was like, if you want to change the dance, change the music. Mm-hmm. So if you also want to change the negotiation, change the way that you're negotiating, because ultimately fundraising is a negotiation. It's a game, to your point, that you're playing in the negotiation and how you set certain things up. So what I will also say about fundraising, it's important to mention here too, is that less than 2% of all funding goes to female founders or minority founders. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting if you look at the research on why. So there's a lot of sort of unconscious bias that is present within both male and female investors. There's an incredible TED Talk by Dr. Dana. I'll share the link for reference. But she actually studied 10 years of sort of pitch competitions at TechCrunch to see how men and women present themselves. And men and sort of female and male founders present themselves in a very similar way. The language they use is very similar. But going back to asking good questions, the questions that they get asked are very different. So women or minority founders get asked, tell me how you're not going to lose customers. Tell me how you're not going to fail. Tell me about how you're preventing going bankrupt. These are very different questions from saying, tell me about the potential of your business. How big can this be? Show me the future. Show me your vision. What's the best case scenario? You're shining a light on one business, and for the other sort of founder, you're starting on a back foot, right? Because it's suddenly like, how do I defend myself? Right. Versus how do I show you what my vision is? It's a very different mindset also for the founder to be in when answering these questions. So she went on to do the research to really see that both male and female investors ask these kind of differentiated questions. So I think that's just important to highlight here, because I think as an investor, being conscious of this unconscious bias makes you a better investor, so that you're aware of the questions that you ask female founders versus male founders.
Interesting. So do you think that female founders and male founders have different qualities?
They can. They can be.
What would you say, if I don't like to box normal people or genders, but if the study proves it, then what do you say is these maybe superpower or special skills from female founders versus maybe male founders?
And there's lots of data and research on this that I can't reference right now, but Adam Grant and a lot of other professors reference certain things around leadership qualities. But I think for founders specifically, the way that we present ourselves, and this was in the study, is very similar. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the data, female founders actually run more successful and profitable businesses that are less risky. They've actually de-risked their businesses. And that's something that VCs look for, is how have you de-risked this? Right. Versus male founders that might act more quickly, but they might be more pro-risk and not risk averse, because they're faster in their decision making, and they might sort of, because they have more momentum also with fundraising, move things faster or burn money faster, because that's kind of the framework that they've been given.
Yes.
So I think we also act accordingly to that, right?
Interesting. I had a meeting today with my team here in New York, and it was interesting. I told them we need to think slower and act faster.
Yeah.
And I think what I now understood that
Yeah.
you said the study shows that females actually doing exactly that.
Yeah.
And that's actually how big projects, I think, really can be successful by thinking sometimes a bit slower, and for having listening a big tip. And to mention the third university, just to make it complete, I'm German, so I need to be, very
sure.
exact. Also, Webster University, you also studied. What was one key takeaway there, what you can share for entrepreneurs?
So that's where I studied international relations and economics. So I had a completely different academic career.
Wow.
But that was in Geneva. So the goal there was to really be close to UN. We had a lot of visiting professors from the UN as well. So I think that really gave me a macro outlook on the world, because going back to your point on the world of finance, finance isn't just numbers in an Excel sheet. It's human behavior that influences macroeconomic trends ultimately at the end of the day. And politics is also very much influenced by economics, right? It's all connected, money and power. So at a macro level, to understand how key markets are moving and sort of macro trends, I think that was a really great foundation to study, to truly sort of be able to see these opportunistic moments in the markets and in sort of things that were shifting.
Right. Very interesting. What I think is also very interesting is that you really had many brands, or let's say you secured big partnerships with, let's say, Microsoft and also Expo.
Yeah.
What's the secret to getting such big players to say, yes, I want to work with you, even if you, of course, smaller than me, right? So what can we learn here?
Again, and I'll iterate this again and again and again, business is about people. Ultimately, it's always about people.
Right.
So identifying and really connecting with people, whether they're at Microsoft or a massive organization, but at a human level. So for context, we're proudly part of something called Microsoft for Startups. There's around 90,000 startups in their whole ecosystem. But out of the 90,000, they've selected 120 to go to market. There's a specific program called Pegasus, which is like their elite startup program. Mm-hmm. We're the only one really from that's been actually very few female founders in this 120, proudly one of them.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But it's a 2-year program where they actively take us to market. They give us marketing exposure, technical support. It's a wonderful program. And for any founders listening.
And they have then a certain percentage from the company later?
No.
Or? Oh, wow.
No, because their goal is to drive consumption of cloud and other services. Right. So it's a win-win-win. Yeah. But being part of that program happened because I reached out to some of the directors. I supported them on some conferences. We connected on other topics, and then somehow then got nominated to this program. So again, it goes back to people, connecting with them on a human level, understanding how you can help them. And ultimately, I feel like these things come back around, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but you need to plant seeds in these kind of relationships and then watch them and nurture them and watch them grow. And through that Microsoft partnership, we then got other opportunities. But again, it's really about meeting people at a human level and connecting and truly making sure you are aligned on values and you are aligned on business opportunities together, and showing that you can collaborate and be willing to collaborate and show up fully,
Yeah, be also there.
Yes.
And I think for you, what I learned from your talking to your intern, and also already talking to you before the podcast, is you really see it also as a two-way street to give value. And I think that's such an important thing to do also when it comes to networking. Otherwise, it's not useful for anything. So you also need to provide values. It's a two-way street, and I think that's one of the key learnings as well. I think that's so powerful. Yeah.
And be generous in it too, right?
Yeah.
And be authentic in it, because you can feel when people say something nice just for the sake of saying something nice. But if you're really authentic about saying, oh, I'd love to connect you with such and such, and that creates value for both parties involved, it's, again, a win-win-win.
Yeah. I think we also now mentioned Microsoft. You and you just told me also, went to a workshop or a conference to them. So they're also very strong, of course, in AI. They provide also the cloud service for ChatGPT.
Yes.
So they have a bit a deeper knowledge about it, right? Let's talk about this as well. Many brands and companies still misunderstand AI, especially I think when it comes to sales. What's the biggest myth that's costing companies millions? What do you think? Where do you have to focus?
That's a good question. And yes, Microsoft is doing a lot around AI. Just to mention that there was an AI tour here recently in New York that we were also part of. And we saw a lot of the main topics and trends and themes around your question there as well, because I think a lot of enterprises and businesses know they need to do something with AI. They just don't know how, what, or why. But everybody knows they need it, right? Yes. But what is it that you need? And ultimately, I think technology is solving a problem. So what problem are you solving with AI, right? Don't just throw things at it to throw things at it. And as we say in AI, bad data in, bad AI out. Good data in, good data or AI out. So it's really also making sure that you, A, understand the problem that you're solving, and then B, have the right structure of data to make sure that you use AI in the most optimal way. I think a lot of enterprises today are now trying to become AI companies, but they're traditional companies in whatever they do, right? But they're trying to scramble and trying to put together their own AI teams. Right. What I would say is, of course, from a compliance and a structure perspective, have your in-house expertise, but it's sort of like having an in-house lawyer or working with a law firm. Find partners that you can work with that are specialized in AI that can solve the problems that you want to solve, because they'll be more agile and nimble and focused teams that can probably iterate a lot faster. And I would say also validate this by working with innovative validated startups, because they are at the forefront of innovation and technology when it comes to AI. If you find the right way to partner with these startups, you're going to move a lot faster than trying to build your own internal team and then processes and projects and so on, because then you're distracted from your actual day-to-day business. Right. So just to mention Microsoft again, there's something called Pegasus, and Pegasus has actually validated all of these startups. So it's a great partner for enterprises, because if they want to do something in healthcare, they have the top validated AI healthcare companies that they already work with, have done architectural reviews on, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're not really sure from a risk perspective to work with a startup, but you go to a cloud provider like a Microsoft and say, what are your top validated partners or startups? Right. Then you have some filtration and you have some, again, trust, because a partner like Microsoft obviously has the best of the best and they know what they're doing. So it's a great sort of reference, but also funnel to see like what are the top companies that are coming in this space, and right, to learn from them too.
So having this view now already into AI, how do you see, will it now affect the business? Will it replace, let's say, everyone doing, I don't know, $100,000 job I read lately? They will not exist anymore. No more software as a service, as it will be all replaced with AI. Or will it be just an addition that we can do things faster and more efficient with a higher quality?
I think AI is going to replace tasks, not necessarily skilled people in certain jobs, but I do think there will be a disruption for sure in the workspace. Our ethos and our mission is to always make sure that AI is empowering people to do better jobs, but there's still a physical reality that we live in, still a physical world that we interact with. So AI can't replace everything, but I think AI can optimize tasks and optimize people. So I see a vision of a future where it's very hybrid, where your, let's say a nurse or a doctor still needs to physically examine you, right? Like physically, because we're not going to have robots everywhere doing everything all the time. However, there might be an AI optimization piece, again, around that's compliant, etc. So there's that hybrid of machine and human, or AI and human, to really empower the expert or the person or the sort of skilled worker and replace maybe a lot of their tasks that takes time.
Is there any danger in this?
There's always a danger and a risk in every technology and every change.
Because, I mean, you also have, actually also in Silicon Valley, a community, and I met some of them quite strong, who say that, who say quite strong that AI is the biggest risk humanity ever had.
And I think that's why we need more philosophers, we need more artists, we need more people who've studied humanities. We need people with different backgrounds to build out this AI evolution as it evolves, because it's really an evolution. Because AI is a reflection of us. As I said before, bad data in, bad AI out. Good data in, good AI out. But whatever we're putting in is a reflection of all of us. But at the moment, the tech world is still it's still a bit of a bubble, right? We don't have full diversity in tech. I mean, just goes back to the funding data point that I gave you earlier, that 2% of female founders or minority founders get funded. That means there's 98% don't. Like there is a massive gap in diversity in tech and diversity of thought in tech. I just don't mean by people, but I mean in thought. So if you think about philosophers, musicians, artists, etc. Like there's so much on a legal level as well that I think we need to have public debates and discussions around that we're not. And unfortunately, in every country, the legal frameworks and the people who are creating law also need to be experts in this, because it's evolving at such a rapid pace. So how do you regulate something like this, right?
Yeah.
It's a big challenge.
For sure. But I think when you look at innovation and also adoption rate of new innovation, always looking back, there was a certain resistance, let's say, put this on certain things. And I remember we now in New York when the car was invented en masse from Mr. Ford himself. People said just before in New York, oh my gosh, we all will die, because there were so many horses doing their businesses on the street that people thought, okay, it will be the biggest pandemic and everything will happen here. And then some disruption come and things move on. And I think also here, I think we haven't seen the entire picture of AI yet, and also robots. So I went to Silicon Valley last year because I wanted to learn more about AI. And I think right now Silicon Valley and China are the two locations. So this year, hopefully I can make it to China. Why do I mention that? And I looked at both communities. So I went to the guys who said, look, Michael, AI is the biggest threat ever. We should come together and do something against it. And then I went to the other people who said, Michael, AI is the absolute future, and also robots. And I visited just many, but one founder of an AI company who had all those robots also walking at home around, all AI, fully autonomic by themselves, running around. And so he said to me, Michael, I think that my robot dog should also have, for example, maybe an American passport, and should also be willing and should also be able to vote. And the robots were able to open the doors and close the doors of this home. And and then, for example, the house could also not let him in, because the door was also fully powered by AI, and based on the mood of the house, the door could open or not. So I told him, look, for me, it's a bit far away to understand at this moment that those robots should have a passport at all, and then also have the right to vote. And then he asked me some interesting questions, what made me understand the situation better. And he said, okay, when do you think, is it a robot or a human? And do you not think that we also should be able to marry a robot? What do you think about that?
Goes back to the Turing test, right? How do you know if you're speaking to, like, in terms of consciousness? But I think there's a big question to your point on, like, what is being human? What is digital identity, and so on. So don't really have a good answer in terms of legally if we should marry technology consciousness, but we're already seeing, I'm sure you've seen this trend and these reports of people falling in love with these like AI boyfriends and girlfriends. And there's these apps where you can customize your AI partner to optimize them for your likings. There was even a viral TikTok around some toxic AI boyfriend that would just have like outrageously funny comments if you would watch the TikToks, but people were actually somehow falling in love with this persona. So it goes back to that kind of like that movie Her, if you remember.
Right. Yes.
Like, what is love and what is being human and what is emotion? And so I think there's a lot of philosophical debate happening at the moment that we all need to have as a society, right? It's not just this tech bubble that gets to decide these things. I think we need to do it as a community, going back to community. I think it's a fascinating time to be alive. There's going to be so many opportunities and challenges.
For sure.
But one AI project that I also want to mention is something that I heard about recently at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, in London. It has one of the most comprehensive libraries of ancient texts and wisdoms from Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. And they're transcribing and translating all of this into an AI. So that's going to be very interesting from like a consciousness perspective,
right?
To be able to interact with these ancient texts and wisdoms. So I think there are so many ways that AI can be used. Whether AI should have the right to vote or not, I think is a little bit having studied history and international relations and, all of
robots. Do you think robots should have the right to vote?
That's what I mean. Having studied like the historical context of other things, I'm not so sure, because you can maybe program some of these robots with unconscious bias, and there are so many other implications.
But to make the case correct, he also said, okay, what is now a robot? Let's say you have a peacemaker. Some have also, let's say, a hand replacement because they needed a robot arm to do that. Then we have now this, what is it called? Not Brainlink.
Neuralink.
Neuralink.
Yeah.
So yeah, Neuralink. That means a device connected to your brain. And we know that this is already coming. You have people already being in trial here. So it's quite difficult with Peacemaker and so on to understand, are you now a robot or are you now human? What would be your answer?
I think we're seeing more of a merging or converging of human and machine.
Yes.
Because I mean, technically it's not integrated to us, but everybody has their phone in their hands most of the time. So we have a digital extension with us, or a digital companion with us, regardless, right? Might not be just integrated into you quite yet.
Not yet.
But we're still very much attached to our digital connection.
True. Because I do see already people running around in New York with those Apple Vision glasses.
Yeah.
So
I wear
Meta
glasses actually that has AI built into the glasses as well. And so I think we're going to see more of a merging of human and machine. But I still think, to your point on definition, it's maybe a time to truly define what does it mean to be human. And then who gets the right to vote? Because again, anything that's digital might be programmed or can be, you can override an operating system. So kind of getting into the land of like sci-fi territory, which is kind of interesting. But I think, again, we need a conscious conversation as a community where we need philosophers and people who create law. And, we need different perspectives to openly have this debate.
Yeah. 100%, and that's why I like to provoke a little bit with the words he said. But when you think about it again, as I said, like what is then still human and what is robot, it's quite interesting. I came up with the answer then at the end. It's also about having a soul, or being born human. But again, that really will
Let me
change.
ask you a question then. What is a soul?
Yes, exactly. I know. Yeah. You're right. Yes. So I think there will be a bigger discussion coming, and I'm happy to be part of this in our era. Yeah.
And I think that being said, I mean, like, look, women didn't have the right to vote for a very long time.
Yeah, fortunately, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, also different groups of people. So I think also we need to be open to reevaluating our paradigm and reevaluating our norm and truly understanding that maybe times are changing. And so,
and we saw the change, right?
Yes.
In Saudi, we just was mentioning.
Exactly.
And I think it's so interesting that, so true.
Yeah.
You build businesses in AI, education, and also retail. If you had to bet on one major tech shift in the next 5 years, what would that be?
Oh, I think the biggest shift that, we just spoke about it as well, that is happening is the future of work. the way that we work is changing.
How?
And I was just going to say also, and the way that we learn by default then will change. Because if you look at the two as a funnel,
Yes.
how we learn has prepared us for a certain kind of work for many years, and sort of factory work. And if you look at the historical context of education, right?
Big time.
And I think now, and as we spoke about in my journey too, I'm self-taught in the world of tech. You know, if you study a tech degree by year 4, year 5, when you've graduated, a lot of the technology has already changed.
Yes.
Right. So it's not about doing these long, heavy degrees, but it's micro learning and adaptive learning. And, you know, you need to keep iterating with the times. So I think that's what I mean by also the future of work, because we're becoming more hybrid. There's remote working opportunities. And I think there's so much automation that will happen. So we really need to focus on what it means to be human, what it means to have work that is meaningful in ways that make us uniquely connect, in ways that AI cannot. So I think for anyone looking around the future of work for their own job security or for trends is to truly think about, okay, what makes us uniquely human and positioned in that way. So for example, going back to Getbee, it's empowering the sales associate because for thousands of years, people buy from people. That trust is very hard to replace with something that's automated. I can see you, I can feel the product, I can, have a conversation. So what makes us uniquely human? And what sectors will the human element still be key? And how can I double down on those skills to make sure that human connection is still there versus what can be automated and replaced? And I think that's where we're going to see the biggest shift in terms of automation, because a lot of things can be now automated at scale. Agentic is a big word in AI at the moment.
True.
So everything that's agentic related will be automating tasks at scale. So I think that differentiation is going to be very interesting.
Super interesting. Let's talk at the end very quick about some outlook, but also about Getbee, because what I think also about very successful entrepreneurs, they are fully identifying themselves with it. I mean, you have a yellow jacket because it's your color. You have bees all over, if I may say.
And even my earrings.
Yes. So, what's the mission now for Getbee, and how do you see the future?
I was going to say, if you're ever at a conference or event and you see someone in a yellow jacket, it's probably me.
Perfect.
Yes. So our mission, as I mentioned earlier, is to really make sure that we're empowering humans with the latest AI. So how can we make commerce truly human?
Right.
How can we truly empower people and not replace people with AI? So our biggest mission now that we're also scaling through the partnership of Microsoft, we're growing now here in the United States. It's very interesting to work with any kind of consultative selling. Mm-hmm. So everything from cars, real estate, furniture, electronics, jewelry, maternity, all of these kind of categories. It's not just traditional retail in terms of clothes, but anything that's consultative in nature, where you want to talk to a person and not a chatbot, that's where we come in.
If you could go back to your 20-year-old self, just as you were starting out a year ago, what is a piece of advice that would have saved you years of struggle?
I would have said to my 20-something-year-old self, I would have said, and I say it to myself still again now, because I think this is a constant learning, is trust yourself. I think that would have saved me a lot of struggle and time, because especially as women, we overthink everything, right? We have this paralysis analysis situation, but really trust yourself and listen to your intuition. I think often there's moments when I've really trusted my intuition and my gut feelings, and I've acted on them, and I just knew things were right or wrong or whatever they were. But the moments when I try to convince myself otherwise, that's when challenges happen. And maybe those challenges were supposed to happen because I'm learning something in that process, but everything's a learning. However, really honing in on trusting yourself.
So trust your inner feeling.
Yes.
If you want to do something, if you don't want to do something, if it feels right.
Really lean into those inner feelings. Yes. Trusting your intuition.
Right. I think that's so powerful. There are many studies of CEOs, and I studied those studies very intense, not only for the podcast, especially also as like kind of self-help. And one thing what I saw is that many CEOs make the decisions based out of a feeling, and then they justify it with some, let's say, facts,
Data.
right?
Yeah.
Data. It's quite interesting, and the success rate of the decisions done fully on feelings or by feelings is like way beyond everything else. So I think it was 80-20.
And I think in this world, this business world,
Right.
we often talk about feelings as something that's wishy-washy, or it's like not so scientific. And the older me, or I would say the younger me, the older version of me, the younger version of me would have said the same, sort of like, oh, but that's just nonsense, or oh, that's just a really silly thing to say. But actually, if you really tune into your intuition and your feelings and to learn how to feel your feelings is hard, by the way, right? Because
100%.
we're so trained not to, and to be logical and to be sort of robotic at times,
Yes.
especially in leadership, to be a bit more sort of disconnected from ourselves. And maybe that helps certain people to make certain decisions. But the more in tune I've become with my feelings, and then going through everything I went through with death and grief and divorce and personal challenges in my life, forced me truly and deeply to connect to myself again. And I say it was my biggest gift. That truly became part of my superpower too, was truly connecting to myself and then actively listening. Because then when I actively listen and I'm tuning into my intuition, I fully hear what's being said, not just verbally, but I fully hear what's happening.
Right. I think that's so powerful to underline what you said at the beginning. What you would tell to your 20-year-old self is also not only like trust your gut, also to understand you are good enough. Because I think an entrepreneur always looks now, oh, I need to have still this degree, or I still need this knowledge. And, we're all starting out and don't know sometimes how to overcome the challenge or the opportunity or the problem we have today.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing learning curve, basically, and to understand I'm good enough for it. Because I met successful entrepreneurs who made billions of dollars of revenue, and they said, oh, Michael, I wish I would have a degree like you, because they didn't went through university. They stopped actually, and they just built this business, and they make billions of dollars, big unicorns. And I said, look, I wish I would have the company. I can give you my degree anytime. I think it's just the understanding of being enough.
And also, to your point on being enough, why are you doing what you're doing? Because those billions of dollars can feel very empty.
True.
And very lonely if you don't have a good foundation in why and what matters to you. So a question I have for you, and this is something I ask everybody, is what does money mean to you emotionally?
For me, money is like energy.
Mm-hmm.
That means because why do I say that? I saw people in all different. I think it just multiplicates what you do. So. You will donate when you have little money and do good with it, and you will do this also when you have much money. Vice versa. I think it's like it's a way of an energy for me. Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think entrepreneurship in that sense as well, or business and leadership, can be quite an existential and philosophical journey, because
100%.
you are then faced with a lot of realities and questions and challenges at different times of your life, and you sort of question, why am I doing it this way, or why am I doing it that way? And sometimes you're forced to feel your feelings when you don't expect to, and also lean into these moments of uncertainty and trusting yourself to figure things out.
100%. And I think figure things out is also, that's about entrepreneurship. And I think the world's biggest problems get solved by entrepreneurs.
Yes.
That means when you talk about clean energy, when you talk about healthcare solution, when you talk about just to create jobs, right? It's all about, at the end, entrepreneurship, I think, who overcome those big challenges, or just for yourself to take care of yourself or your family or whoever you want to take care. I think it's important.
I like to say it's professional problem solving.
Yes, professional problem solving for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Thea, it has been amazing to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Before you go, a quick note to all the entrepreneurial listeners out there. If you're looking for a reliable and efficient way to scale your online business and payments, I highly recommend checking out copecard.com. It's designed to streamline your processes from payment processing to customer management, all in one platform. Whether you're just starting out or you're looking to scale up, Copecard provides the tools you need to succeed. Visit copecard.com today and see how it can transform your business operations. Dive in and start optimizing your sales processes now.